The iPhone 16e, I've been using it now for the past week as my primary device. And you know what? It's actually starting to make some sense, particularly the price. And after we've looked at the iPhone 16e, then we're going to look at this mid-year dump that we've just had from Apple, and we're going to work through it all and try and make sense of it as well. My name's David, this is D Talking Tech, and here we talk about Apple intelligently. First of all, the name. I'm not convinced that the 16e was the right way to go. I'm sure Apple's marketing team are far brighter than I am. But for my reckoning, assuming this phone's going to be on a 2-year cycle, which is my best guess, then we're going to have the iPhone 18 on sale while we've still got the 16e. Now, a point I'm going to come back to a few times during the course of this video is talking about the kind of buyer that's going after this phone. And maybe the buyer that's going to be looking at this phone doesn't give a flying hoot about the number that sits at the beginning of it, what its prefix is. So maybe 16e doesn't matter to them. But it just is, to me, it looks like it's going to sit slightly weirdly when we've got the 16e and then the iPhone 18. But I don't know, that could just be me. Now, the actual layout of the phone, I'm going to talk about the design and everything in a moment, but the stripped back style of this phone really appealed to me. I didn't know what to make. It's the first time I've had a small phone in ages, and I don't think I've ever had an SE. And when I was in London last week, just having this really stripped back, simple design, it just kind of appealed. It just made things that much easier. And I suppose it depends on how you're going to be using your phone. And now I've got a choice. I'm not sending this back. I'm definitely keeping this phone. And I suppose in the position I'm in now, I can decide when I'm going out, if it's going to be a heavy day of taking photos or video work, then I'll take the Pro Max with me. But if it's just going to be a simple day, say, with the family or out with friends or whatever, then I can just take the 16e because it's got a camera, which I'll be talking about a little bit later on, and its functionality is great. And it's just so easy to carry around. So I think it kind of depends on the day that I'm going to have as to which phone that I would use. Now, beginning to look at more who this phone is for, I reckon it's for people that have got iPhones that are probably 5, 6, maybe 7 years older. Maybe some of the SE owners are looking for another simple phone to upgrade to. And that is who this phone is for. And I think as we begin going through the specs, that's an important point to remember. Again, there were those people talking about the lack of colors, black and white. Why I've only got black and white. I bet you 99% of these phones are going to end up in cases, so it really doesn't matter what the colours are. The fact we've just got black and white, I don't think is a particularly big issue. Now, it was ironic, actually, that last week, through their other announcements, Apple were making a big play that they're going to make setting up Macs even easier by bringing your phone near and setting up a Mac through that. The setup of this phone, which as you know is normally such a smooth operation now, got a bit confused. I backed up my 16 Pro Max, so I had a fresh backup the morning I was setting this up, and it got to install from backup, and it got really confused. It just didn't want to go to that latest backup. I had to go to one from the day before, the night before, something. For some reason, the whole thing stalled, and I had to start the process over again. But that was the only hiccup I had. As you know, setting up these phones is really straightforward now. Now, as to the weight, size, and design, I've already said that this stripped-back design I actually really love. The fact there's no camera bump, the fact it's so light, it's so easy to hold. I really, really like it. It's kind of got that retro feel to it, I guess. It just takes you back to some of the classic iPhones of years gone past. And I happen to really, really enjoy the way it looks. Now, the price is something I'm going to cover more fully in a moment. But when they were pricing this up, they knew there were certain things that would be immediately noticeable, even to the kind of people that are buying this. And one of those was the screen. So we've now got an OLED panel on here. And that's one of those really, it quite literally is in your face. So the fact we've got an OLED panel, it looks like pretty much any other iPhone, was a really important thing for them to do. So when you pick it up, you've got a bright, punchy, colourful screen. And that was a good call. Now, obviously, it's only a 60 hertz refresh rate on this phone. And I'd be interested to know from you what you do on your phones that makes 120 hertz refresh rate important. I'm still of that school. And I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to die on my sword on this one, that the 60 versus 120 doesn't really matter to me that much. I've said it before, maybe it's because I'm not constantly scrolling and I'm not a gamer. Maybe that is the big issue here. If I was a gamer, that 120 hertz refresh rate would really matter to me. But the fact it's not on here really hasn't been a deal breaker. But if it is to you, let me know. As to one of the other features that we would have immediately noticed if it wasn't there, Face ID. Gone now is the Touch ID, the fingerprint ID. We've now gone with Face ID, and it's so convenient. I love that. So what with this screen and having Face ID, I think they were two good features added to this 16E that if they hadn't been there, people would have been moaning about. As to the features that I miss, right at the top of that list, and you guys are really quick to mention this on one of my other videos recently, MagSafe. As I said, I was up in London the other day. I stayed overnight. I was in a hotel room. And the amount of times I went to throw this on the MagSafe charger, only for it to fall off. It's just so convenient to have MagSafe now. I MagSafe charge 99% of the time, I would say. I'm always on MagSafe, so I kind of do miss not having that on here. And the other thing, funny enough, that I missed was the camera control button. Now, it's weird because when I had my Pro Max, for the first 2 or 3 months of using that, I forgot the camera control button was there at all. But now I've trained myself to use it. I don't go into all the different features and the photo styles and aperture settings and lens settings. I just use it to launch a camera, but I go to it all the time. So I think that's more me because obviously I've been used to using that phone. But I do miss, it's just muscle memory. I do miss having it there. But both those features aren't going to be features that people that are buying this phone miss because, as I said, they're probably coming from older phones anyway or an SE. So they won't have had the camera control button and they won't have had MagSafe. MagSafe wasn't on the SE. So it's kind of a case of what you've not had, you don't miss. Now, the battery life. The battery life on this thing is astounding. Absolutely amazing. It's knocked my 16 Pro Max into a cocked hat. And on standby, this thing, the battery virtually never dims. It never goes down. I don't know what they're doing with it. And I've been using it as my primary device, which for me includes sat-nav, streaming some music or podcasts, general kind of phone use day to day. Camera work, okay, yeah, sure. I haven't been doing the high-end camera work I sometimes do on there, but the very highest-end camera work I do on my 16 Pro Max, well, that's normally carried out in the studio here when I'm recording in ProRes and log. So I don't know what they're doing with this phone, but it's magic. But what I do think is possibly leading into that battery life is the modem. That was one of the really interesting things about this phone. It's Apple's first attempt at putting their own modem inside of it. And we've got the C1 modem in here. And it's not the finished article. When I was in London, I was right in the centre of London. Obviously, we haven't got the millimetre wave on here, so I wasn't getting the fastest 5G. And it isn't as fast as my Pro Max. But Apple have almost admitted to say, look, this is our first attempt at it. We know it's not the finished article, but it's important to them to bring everything in-house. The more they can keep everything in-house, the more they're in control of production from start to finish. So I understand why they want to go that route. And if this is their first attempt and it's made this much of a difference to battery life, and it's the only thing that I can think is making that big of a difference, that is mighty, mighty impressive. And it's really exciting about what the future may be as well.
So someone else that I know has got the 16E is Andrew Clare, fellow creator over in the States. Andrew, hi, how you doing?
Doing good, man. How are you?
I'm very well. So I promised you I was going to step away from home. I wanted this to be a true test of the modem. I'm in the middle of nowhere at the moment, and it's as if you're standing next to me. It's uncannily clear.
Yeah, the quality is actually pretty insane. And this isn't a cellular call. This is FaceTime, right?
Exactly, yeah, it's FaceTime
Yeah.
call. And we're doing FaceTime audio call. We're recording it in FaceTime. And I mean, I know you've got a 16E, so you've had obviously the same week as me. What have you made of it so far? I've been talking on the video about my thoughts. It'd be really interesting to hear what your take on it is.
Yeah, so coming from, downgrading from the iPhone 16 Pro Max, wanted to try it out maybe a week, 30 days, 45 days. And honestly, it's pretty good. Like super lightweight. I like how it feels. I love the design. I do miss MagSafe. I thought I'd miss Dynamic Island, but honestly, I don't even really think about it. And yeah, it's pretty much a good day-to-day phone. Like most people would be fine using this phone.
And the one thing I found, we haven't mentioned this at all, is the battery life. It is astounding. It goes on
Incredible.
and on. I'm getting at least 2 days out of it easily. I've been using it as my primary phone for the last week now. And the battery is just insane. I'm doing all the same things that I'm doing on my Pro Max, which for me, perhaps like you, listen to podcasts, streaming some music, some sat nav, general day-to-day stuff. And the battery just lasts and lasts and lasts. Do you reckon that's a C1 modem in it?
Oh, definitely. I think it gets me excited too, because like imagine the C1 in like a Pro Max. But honestly, like it's better than my 16 Pro Max. It's better than the 16 that I've used. It's I'd say the closest that it's been is like an S25 Ultra,
Yeah,
and I even think it might even be better than that.
yeah, I mean, I
Like
haven't used
it's
those, but
really good.
it's astounding. It's blowing me away. I was just mentioned that in the video that the battery life on this is just phenomenal. You almost got to pinch yourself to think that you haven't had to charge it in 2 days. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, like getting home around 4:30 from my job, it's at like 50%,
Easy,
45%,
yeah.
which is just never the case with other iPhones that I've used.
Oh, Andrew, I'm so glad you're finding it as good a phone as me. They are really quite something, aren't they?
Yeah, no, it's a good phone. You know, if you're on the fence coming from like an iPhone 11, this would be the phone to get
Yeah,
for sure.
totally, totally. Well, I'll leave all the details of where people can watch your channel and find you. But it
I
was just
appreciate
great
that.
catching up with you from the States and hearing how you're finding it over there. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Yeah, yeah, no problem, man. Have a good
Cheers,
one.
man. Thank you. Cheers.
The camera. We've always got to talk about the camera on these phones. It's only got a single 48 megapixel camera with a 2x zoom on it. And you know what? It does the job. Look, I get really granular when nerdy when I'm using my Pro Max. I play with all the different lens apertures and settings that I've got, and I love photography. So that phone is suited to me. But that isn't the sort of person that's going to be buying this phone. I keep coming back to it. It's going to be, if there is an average user, it's going to be an average user that's going to go out and buy this phone. And for them, they just want to take pictures. They want to take snaps. They want to enjoy themselves during the day. They don't want to be getting into the 35, 28 mil, 24 mil. They just want to take a picture. And it takes good pictures. You can see there's a few pictures on screen now that I took when I was in town or around at home. It takes good pictures. If you just want some decent memories, honestly, this phone is going to serve you well. And I think to begin pulling apart all the spec sheets on this phone is kind of pointless. That's not what this phone's about. Yes, we can go through and find all the slight detail differences that it hasn't got compared to X, Y. But don't forget, Apple comparing this phone, I think, to the 11 and to the 12, if you look at their spec sheets. I just don't think going through the spec sheets really, really holds any water on this phone. I think it's a phone that's meant to be picked up, used, and enjoyed. As simple as that. And we're going to cover this when we talk about the other things that Apple have launched recently. But I think Apple are very keen to have a device or product at every price point through their lineup for everybody. So if somebody just wants a phone, they've got this. They've got the 16E. It brings them in to the ecosystem. And that is really, really important. It's not just about phone sales for Apple. They've got a massive, massive software business behind it, a bundles business behind it. Apple One, for instance, that I subscribe to, it's that subscription model. Once you've got an iPhone, you begin subscribing to Apple News, Apple Fitness, Apple TV, Apple One. That's where they make their recurring income. That's where they make their safe income. It's an important phone to get you into their ecosystem. Now, I know £599 was a price that a lot of people raise their eyes at, but you know what? It makes complete sense. This phone, on the whole, is going to be bought and used by people on carrier upgrades. It's going to come through their cellular provider, and they're probably going to be on a 2-year contract, or you're going to go into Apple and buy it on a 2-year plan. And for 2 years, 24 months, £599, £25 a month. They know that was the magic cutoff. When somebody walks in and says, how much is it going to cost you a month? They can say £25 a month over 2 years. It's a done deal. And you've got to admit, £25 a month for this phone doesn't sound bad. I'm not the typical buyer. I bought this outright, but that is not how most people are going to be buying this phone. If it doesn't come to you and land up in your pocket or in your hand through a cell upgrade, it's going to be through work. Business, B2B. This is a corporate phone through and through. So many businesses are going to be taking these by the shed load and handing them out to employees. And that's where Apple are going to make their money. It's very keenly priced for the market they want, and it's bringing new people into the fold. And that is what Apple were all about with the 16E. And if this is the first of my videos you've seen, welcome along. I hope you're enjoying the way that I talk about Apple gear. I talk about all Apple gear every week here on the channel, and I'd love you to be part of this growing community. We're growing really quickly at the moment, and the best way to do that is just turn on those notifications and subscribe to the channel. It's really simple. Then every time I upload a video, you'll be the first to know it. Oh, and also, I do send out a free, totally free members video newsletter every Sunday, and it just talks about the kind of things I can't talk about on these main videos. If that sounds like it might be interesting to you, I talk about sponsors, what's coming up on the channel, what I'm up to, what things are happening here in the studio. If that sounds interesting to you, just pop over to my website, talkingtechandaudio.com, leave me details there, and you'll get a free video newsletter every single Sunday. Right, let's talk about this mid-year dump that we've basically had 2 weeks of Apple launching a load of gear for us. So let's just begin to go through that, unpack it, and see what's been going on. And let's start off with the iPad Air. As far as I can make out, the iPad Air only got the M3 chip. So it's going to be quicker. It's going to be better. A lot of people rave about the iPad Airs. It's almost the sweet spot between the standard iPads and the iPad Pro. It's always been seen as quite a good value iPad. And I guess it's going to be slightly better now. It's got M3 in it. It's got the M3 chip means it'll have better ray tracing and mesh shading. So from what I understand, as I say, I'm not a gamer, but that's going to give you more of a console quality of gaming. Apart from the new keyboard that came with it, I think that was really all that was new with the iPad Air. The next iPad to look at is the iPad, the base iPad. And this is one that I just really don't understand. I follow Apple news quite closely, as you'd imagine, and I thought every new Apple device that was launched now was going to be Apple Intelligence ready. But this isn't. It's got the A16 chip, not the A17 chip, so it's not Apple Intelligence ready. Yes, it is very keenly priced. I think you can get it for £329 here in the UK. And yes, I know a lot of the buyers for that iPad are going to be in the education sector. Maybe Apple Intelligence isn't terribly important there, and you could joke maybe Apple Intelligence isn't important anyway. But I was just surprised because people, again, are buying this iPad, are going to have it for 5, 6, 7 years. And I would have thought putting the A17 chip in there, like the iPad mini, would have been a sensible move. But hey, again, perhaps they know best. Perhaps they know who are the people that are going to be buying that iPad, and maybe Apple Intelligence really isn't that important to them. So that was the iPad updates we had there. Fairly straightforward, not really that much to talk about there. But the star of the show, without a single shadow of a doubt, was the announcement of the new M4 MacBook Air. Now, I've got the M3 MacBook Air, and every time I pick it up to use it, I forget just how good a machine it is. It is a fantastic machine. And with this year's release, it's going to continue to be Apple's best-selling laptop by a streak. Why? Well, they've taken £100, $100 off of it, so you can now buy the 13-inch M4 MacBook Air for £999. And also you get double the RAM. You get 16 gigs rather than 8 gigs of RAM. So basically, for less money, you're getting a much better Mac, whichever way you look at it. This is the Mac that you could almost recommend to everybody to go and buy. It's been the best laptop now for most people for years and years and years. And with the improvements I made this year with the 12 megapixel center stage camera, it's just getting better and better and better. I was really surprised though. I mean, we know there's those raised eyebrows about the price of the 16E, but with this, they've managed to drop the price whilst improving the specs. Now, I'm not political at all, and that certainly isn't what this channel's about, but I understand over in the States, there's all these new tariffs coming into place. So I was really surprised that they were able to significantly reduce the price of the entry-level M4 MacBook Air. But what a great machine it is to buy. And I'm really tempted to get one. Let me know if you'd like me to pick one up and trade this in. I looked just before making this video what I would get on trading for this, and I think it was £550 I was being offered for this M3 MacBook Air, which means I'd only have to spend £449 to get the base level 13-inch. Now that's 15-inch. I keep every time I change a MacBook Air, I go from the larger screen to the smaller screen. My thoughts now are that maybe I should go for the 13-inch, buy into what its USP is, i.e. super portable, and take advantage of the trade-in and buy myself a 13-inch M4 MacBook Air. And if you'd be interested in me doing that and reviewing it here on the channel for you, let me know in the comments. And also let me know what it is you'd like me to look at, particularly if I do that. And these MacBook Airs, they are so powerful now. I'm pretty convinced I could run this entire channel from a MacBook Air. I'd probably need a second display. I've got portable displays that I use. But I think from a power point of view, certainly if I was to begin speccing it up, I'm pretty certain I could edit all of these videos, all of my podcasts, and run the business from a MacBook Air. And that's kind of crazy, right? These things are almost becoming a MacBook Pro. And it makes you wonder, as the years go on and Apple Silicon gets better and better and better, who's going to end up buying MacBook Pros? I was, again, looking at the specs of these. If I was to fully spec up a MacBook Air with 32 gigs of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage, the 13-inch version would cost £2,199. And you know what? At that money, I think that represents really good value for money. And it's going to last you for years and get most of anybody's work done. The MacBook Air continues to be just the star of the show without a single shadow of a doubt. Next, we're going to look at the Mac Studios and try and explain that away. So the surprise with the Mac Studio, bearing in mind this is quite a niche product anyway, was we've got a Mac Studio with an M4 Mac chip, and we've got a Mac Studio with an M3 Ultra chip. And that's what's confusing people. The M4, M3, M3 sounds older. Surely it must be older. There's a couple of reasons I think they went that route. First of all, once you begin looking at some of the more important specs day to day, for instance, the ports, the M3 Ultra gets all Thunderbolt 5 ports. It's basically an M4 chip just with an M3 name on it. And there's been some confusion when I was doing the research for this video as to whether it was a fused chip or not. I'd heard some people saying that it wasn't, that it was just a large M3 chip. But if you look at Apple's website, they say it is a fused chip. So I'm assuming it is two M3 Maxes put together to give us the M3 Ultra. And this thing's going to be stupid powerful. Numbers that just blew me away. When I, again, looking down the spec sheet, and I was looking at the spec sheet for this, if you begin to tick the boxes on the M3 Ultra Mac Studio, now I need to get this right, you can go all the way up to 512 gigs of memory, of unified memory. Not storage, 512 gigs of memory. That is crazy numbers. I don't know who's really going to need it. I'm supposing maybe they're aiming this at server farms, or if you're running large LLM models or something. I don't know who's going to need that amount of memory on their Mac, but hey, you can now spec it up. And I said, these machines are never meant to be mass public machines. They are for very high-end creators, way more powerful than I would need. Would I love one? Yeah, sure. But I'm really happy with my M4 Pro Mac Mini. It's doing everything I need of it. It's recording the audio right now. I'll edit it on that machine as well. This video will be edited on that machine. I won't need a Mac Studio. Maybe you do. And if you do, again, let me know what it is that you are looking for out of the crazy figures that you're going to be getting out of these machines. And there was another reason I think that Apple needed to go the M3 Ultra route in the Mac Studio. They need to convince you or give you a reason for those fewer people even still that want to buy the Mac Pro. At the moment, the Mac Pro has got the M2 Ultra in it. And I'm sure I understand there are certain manufacturing issues they're facing creating an M4 Ultra, but it must be sure as hell going to happen later this year that we're going to get an M4 Ultra in the Mac Pro. So again, Apple needed a marketing strategy to say to people, sure, if you want the best of the best of the best, the very quickest, the most up-to-date chip we've got, go and buy the Mac Pro with the M4 Ultra in it. But for the Mac Studio, it made sense to use the M3 Ultra. And I say, if you are in the market, just be wise about what you buy, because I think the M4 Max will be plenty powerful enough for virtually anything that I can think of that you'd want to throw at it. But you've got choices there, and I think that is why they went the route they did. When I made my M4 Mac Mini videos, many of you were saying, I'm just going to hold fire. I'm going to wait and see what happens to the Mac Studios before I buy an M4 Pro Mac Mini. I want to see what's happening with the Mac Studios. We now know what that story is. Let me put it this way. Looking at the specs of the M4 Pro Mac Mini with a 14-core CPU, 20-core GPU, and if I say put 64 gigs of memory with it and 512 gigs of SSD, and look at a similar price Mac Studio, it's as similar as I can get it. The M4 Pro Mac Mini with those specs would cost you £2,199. The base M4 Max costs £2,099, and you get more ports. So possibly, if you have sat back and waited, that's a sensible route to go. That base level Mac Studio, the M4 Mac Studio, begins to look like quite an interesting proposition. One other point that just needs to be touched on here is about innovation. People have been moaning that Apple aren't innovating anymore. Now, for sure, Apple Intelligence is a mess. Just before recording this, I hear that they've decided to pull back the launch of the Intelligence Siri until sometime later this year or into next year. It's a mess. They are getting things wrong at the moment from a marketing point of view. It's not necessarily a halcyon period for them. But when we look at what we've actually physically got at the moment, Apple Silicon changed everything. If it is the modem in this phone that's making the battery life so good, and that's just their first modem, think how good things are going to become. Innovation's weird. You can only innovate so often. This company, in the past 20 years, has given us the iPhone, the iPad, and started the smartwatch revolution. How much more can we expect from them? And when things are kind of as good as they can be, how much better can they become? I'm sure they could throw all sorts of features at the iPhones, features that a lot of Android phones are throwing at them now. Would you use them? Probably not. There's a phrase that comes to mind that is normally associated with sportsmen, and that's that form is temporary, but class is permanent. And I think that applies to Apple. Apple is kind of the best of the best. You can dress it up with all sorts of weird, fancy features that most people won't use, but when it comes down to the core, you're getting a quality bit of kit that you know is going to last and last and last. Are they innovating? Yes, but in a more subtle way. Iterating perhaps more than innovating at the moment. Times are interesting. I'd love to know your thoughts. Also, I made a video a couple of weeks ago when the 16E was first launched, where I said that I thought it was doomed almost from the get-go, and that's the video I've left you to watch on screen right now.